Hello, everybody. This is Susan and Nick from SuperStar Communicator. We have a podcast and a live stream discussing all aspects of spoken communication and having really good business conversations. Tomorrow, it is International Women's Day. So if you're listening on podcast, this is an evergreen podcast. It's on the 8th of March 2024. And the theme for International Women's Day this year is Inspire Inclusion. But we both wanted to ask the question, is International Women's Day still relevant to young people today? And given the fact that, Nick, respectfully, you are Gen Z, you are in a perfect position to be able to answer that question. So I'm throwing that question to you, first of all.
So, from a historical standpoint, I'd say today, but tomorrow, International Women's Day is an opportunity to shed light on historical women who might not have had the chance to be looked at. From my perspective as a classical musician, that would be composers. And on the internet, there is a huge discovery level within YouTube to discover female composers. So that the International Women's Day is a kind of opportunity to shed light on women that might have been overlooked. And today tomorrow it's an opportunity to celebrate women's achievements and personal goals, and sort of from a younger perspective take time to appreciate the strong figures in our lives, and also the fact that there is still a long way to go to achieve full gender equality.
And what does gender equality mean to you?
It would ultimately go down to equal opportunities and the ability to be able to do the same thing and have the same opportunities.
So, looking at some of the research and life now, girls are doing better than boys in exams usually. And there are more young women going to university than boys, more young women training to be doctors and lawyers than men. Surely it's already a better world for women and girls.
Well, that's sort of a perspective from the what would it be? The compared to developing countries and lower end countries that don't have equal rights. In the Middle East, where women still have to have that they aren't able to go to universities, and so in countries outside of the UK and USA, women still don't have the same equal rights. So tomorrow it's a day to shed light on those countries as well.
Yeah, I think that's really a really important point, that we can be seeing what things are like in a first world country, but there are countries all over the world where there are not those opportunities. But also to realize that, when I was in my teens, there were not the opportunities for women and girls that there are now, which is brilliant, and that should be celebrated. I'm not moaning about that. But I just wanted to spend a moment just to share why International Women's Day was really set up. And it was set up in 1908. The women in the textile garment industry in New York protested about equal pay and better work conditions. And it started a movement of recognizing and recognizing the contribution of women and girls in the world and in life. There are traditions of recognizing International Women's Day, not really in Britain, but it's actually a national day in places like Afghanistan. The irony there, because the lack of women's rights, the human rights violations towards women and girls in Afghanistan is immense. But there are other countries like Georgia. So certainly in my family, we have a family friend who's from Georgia, and this is part of their tradition to celebrate women on this day. And in some countries, presents are given to women and girls, places like Italy. So, for my son, I'm expecting a present tomorrow from him. There are proper celebrations. In Italy, mimosa is given to girls. It's a little yellow flowered shrub that has beautiful yellow flowers at this time of the year. And there is a famous mimosa cake. So there are lots of things going on in other parts of the world. But are you aware, Nick, of International Women's Day here and celebrations that are taking place?
I'm actually unaware of any celebrations. For me, one of my friends is having a birthday party on the same day, so it's a bit unfortunate. But I'm aware that there are things like similar to the Pride parades. There are big celebrations going on in the city, and yeah, that usually there are big social media posts that people do to show the top 10 female artists that inspire them to do what they do.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's an opportunity to celebrate the achievements of women, isn't it? Um, Certainly, I'm part of my work is that I do speaking, and I have a couple of speeches. I delivered one yesterday to a fantastic client called Hallion, and it was to inspire career development, career success, which I believe is very empowering. And I have a couple more of those events taking place. But I've seen more and more that one is that there are events going on organized by corporates, but they don't want to spend money on paying a speaker, which the irony there, to empower women, but you don't have a budget to pay for a great speaker. Or even one organization whom approached me and then decided to go down the route of giving a health check to every woman working in their organization. What they're going to do with that data, I don't know. It's all a little bit worrying, isn't it? But other places, they are celebrating by giving everybody a manicure or something like that, rather than let's celebrate how amazing we are and let's have some people who have really achieved and sharing their achievements and to empower you and inspire you. Do you think that that's better?
Well, I suppose it's quite an interesting one. But from a corporate perspective, they're going to put on shows to make it seem like they support that kind of thing. But really, the best way to do that is to shed light on their own diversity within the corporate realm. So the 1% showing how their CEOs are based around a diverse leadership. So not just men as CEOs, but women as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to highlight the senior leadership and the fact that there are some women there. I mean, certainly when I was starting out, after I graduated, if I had seen female leaders very visible, that would be an inspiration for me. And I know that for young women now, that is a real inspiration. And International Women's Day, if it's done in that way, can be a great way to inspire women to do better. We've just heard from Angela Bond. We cannot see who is listening, so please, if you've got a question, if you have a comment, an opinion, please feel free to contribute, because we've set up questions, but getting from other people is brilliant. So Angela Bond, thank you so much for contributing. She says, I recruit for the insurance industry, and there are some great events happening this week in the city to recognise and support International Women's Day. Lots of great networks getting involved. That's brilliant, because in fact, part of career success is building a very strong network. Can you give some examples, Angela?
And
Because
I
these
think
are...
that's sort of an interesting thing from the online perspective, because from International Women's Day, it's a great opportunity to bring conversations around, so that create online discussions. So that's as well as networking, it's a great opportunity to pass on the online discussions.
Yes. And Angela, are there, within the events that you're going to, are there men coming along? Because certainly we're having this discussion. Nick, you're a man. I'm a woman. I think that it's great to have the perspective of both sexes here. But do you encourage male allies to come along? So men that support this as well, support women and support the empowerment of women into more senior roles. I'd be very interested to hear anybody else wanting to contribute. I've heard independently from Antoinette Dale Henderson, who works with women on gravitas to empower themselves to move into senior roles. She said that she's very conscious of the fact that there are some very scary statistics about sexual violence in schools. In 2021, Ofsted published a review of sexual abuse in schools and colleges in England. It found that sexual harassment occurred so frequently that it had become commonplace. Sexist name calling, 92%. Rumours about their sexual activity, 81%. Unwanted or inappropriate comments of a sexual nature, 80%. Sending pictures or videos they didn't want to see, 88%. Now, I mentioned earlier on that girls traditionally do better than boys at exams. More girls go to university, yet there's an increasement of sexual harassment even in schools. What are your thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's that kind of internet problem
Yeah.
that really you're detached from the person than you would be in real life. So there's not when you send a message, you don't see their reaction. So I think there's a kind of psychological element that people actually don't see the effects of what they're doing, or they don't think that they're going to have repercussions as badly. So it's really a problem with the modern technology of the internet and being able to send those explicit messages without thinking of the repercussions. And I think really that needs a modern kind of law, a new law thing.
Yeah, it does. I think that one thing is that if girls are targeted like this at school, it's going to undermine their confidence and almost silence them. If they're being bullied, they're not going to want to speak up in class. Perhaps even their their goal setting for afterwards, that their confidence is going to be knocked by that.
Yeah, and I think it's also it's a growing discussion, which means that there will be teachers who hopefully can discuss that with the students and not leave them completely silent. But ultimately, there needs to be laws in place for social media for younger users to show that there will be repercussions to those kind of messages.
Yes. Well, what does anybody else think? Now, getting back to the idea of allies, Angela has said, yes, absolutely, there are male allies involved in these events. And she also said, I would encourage for us to have those conversations and absolutely bring those male allies to our events. We need this to works together. Now, I will mention yesterday that I was at a client's speaking, and there weren't any males present in the room because it was actually a hybrid event. There were over 900 people at the event, but most of them were online. There were men there as well as women. I've been having messages from loads of people. The men in the room came at the end. They said that because it was for International Women's Day, everyone was welcome. They didn't specifically feel welcome. And we all felt afterwards, gosh, we've learnt from that. We need to actively encourage the men to feel welcome, not just for the sandwiches at the end, but to participate, not just online, but face to face. So that's a really, really good point, Angela. One thing that people often say is, why do we have International Women's Day? There isn't an International Men's Day. What do you think about that? Because we know the answer to this, don't we, Nick?
I think there is a International Men's Day,
Yeah.
but it focuses on the mental health side.
Well, not just the mental health side, but certainly here at SuperStar Communicator, we always celebrate International Men's Day. And one of the challenges for men is mental health. And we've, over the last couple of years, we've had men who are supporting men in that area, and also physical health. So absolutely, we do that. We don't exclude men either for International Women's Day or supporting International Men's Day. Are there any other questions or comments, or is there anything you'd like to say, Nick?
Yeah, from your perspective, how has the attitudes towards, I guess, with women's rights and the International Women's Day changed over the years, from your perspective?
Oh, that's a really good point, because obviously I'm a different generation from you. Do you know, I wasn't aware of International Women's Day 10 years ago. I went to a girls' school, and there was never any mention of that, which is amazing, because I would have thought that they would have picked up on that. But I started to be aware of it just with one or two events that were being shared on the internet. So it has gathered pace. From a point of view of changes in the workplace, you know, I applied for a mortgage back in 1989. That's years before you were born, Nick. And I had I had 3 times my salary. I had a 25% deposit. I had good references. I had a good job. And the broker came back to me and said, we're not giving you a mortgage because you're a single woman on your own, and you will get pregnant and you won't pay back. 25 years later, I wrote to those brokers and said, I've never missed a payment. But my actual broker went back to them and said, you do not know Sue. If there's anyone that's going to pay back, it's going to be Susan. but I had to pay a slightly higher percentage because I was a high risk, because I was a woman. That would never happen now. And certainly there was a situation around the same time when because I was a teacher at the time, in the magazine there was a question about who you should recruit for a job within the teaching profession, and it was the difference: a man with children and a single woman. And without exception, all of the experts said we should give the job to a man with the children because he has a family to support. Now, that was in black and white in the 80s. And certainly when I was a schoolgirl, there were very few female leaders. You know, your headmistress, you'd be aware of the matron, who would be the sort of head nurse in a hospital, and you know, the head nun in the Sound of Music. But there were really very, very few. Then there was Margaret Thatcher. Women couldn't become curates until later on. There were very few women that were on the television as experts. Newscasters came about a little bit later. And when they did come, so Angela Rippon and people, it was a massive thing that their voices were being heard. And there were very few women politicians. There was something that I picked up, that Maria Miller and Harriet Harman, who are both more mature female MPs, and they've been MPs for many years, they said that as the number of female MPs and politicians has increased, there has also been an increase in aggressive, derogatory behaviour and hate abuse, particularly online, towards those women. Now, there are a number of women who have police protection now, and you know, that's pretty scary. I don't know why this is. Is it because there's a correlation between more women's voices being heard in the House of Commons, and this is triggering some individuals to be aggressive? I don't know. What do you think, Nick?
I think it does boil down to that internet kind of anonymous
Do you think so?
element, that people can simply say what they want without any repercussions. But I think there's also just a pushback from some individuals that might feel insecure about that kind of element. But I also think that there's bad attitudes from men in the House of Parliament. There was that case of Boris Johnson against, I can't, is it Angela, the Labour MP?
Oh, yes.
And Boris
Angela
Johnson,
Rayner.
yeah, he said something sexist that was distracting him. And I think there's just poor attitudes from the MPs as well.
Yes, there is. And if you hear the Prime Minister saying something so derogatory, it does send messages to an element of society.
Yeah, he was Prime Minister at that time as well. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Not good.
We could do an entire session on Boris Johnson, but I'm not going to waste the oxygen. He's not worth it.
No.
So I'm aware that people are watching. Please do comment here. But this year, the theme for International Women's Day is Inspire Inclusion. From my point of view, I think that this is a very, very powerful theme. Everything from thinking about a building being welcoming for women and girls as well as men. So, you know, if you go to a normal theatre, beforehand, during the interval and afterwards, there are huge queues of women waiting to go to the loo because there are too few loos, and it's not because we are going into the loos and having a good old chat. In fact, in those situations, everybody washes their hands, gets out quickly because they know that there are other people waiting. But it's because for a number of reasons it takes us longer to go to the loo, changing clothes, or we might need to go to the loo slightly more. Making more loos available to women is a really easy win, isn't it? And also, I was thinking about making buildings safer when people leave, so that everything's lit up. If you're having to walk to a car park, it's properly lit up at night so that you feel safe. Have you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I know that the women I know, especially from university, they're always looking to walk in a group
Yes.
home because there is that fear. So I think in general, a positive mindset for output from the police as well, if they're looking around and supporting women when they're on nights out and walking around the city at that time, that would be a benefit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a really good point. A visible police presence would help women and girls feel safer, but also men. The, the great thing about Inspire Inclusion, if that happens, it means that men become safer as well, doesn't it? If there's a bigger police presence.
Mm.
I know that Birmingham City Council, they've probably not got the money for it now, but they had an initiative um, that they announced a couple of months ago, that they were having a nighttime safety program in place so that women and girls did feel safer if they were working late, that they could get to a bus stop or to a taxi rank or to their cars more safely, with better lit roads, and also a bigger police presence. But as I say, that's probably been overridden now, sadly. But that's I feel that everybody benefits from that.
Mm. And I was just thinking about how your experience with bankers saying that they weren't going to give you um, that kind of payment, I think is still happening today, where CEOs are decided um, based on that a similar kind of thought process, that women are less likely to be chosen for higher up roles because they might be pregnant and take time off. So I think there is a, a needed discussion within the higher realms of a CEO and the higher roles that needs to be happening as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because International Women's Day, of course, and Inspire Inclusion is partly about inspiring talented women to stay at an organization, and for an organization to make the most of that talent and expertise, whether they're male or female. Brilliant. So I don't know if anybody has anything else to comment on, if anybody wants to say hi. But before we finish, let's both of us think of the answer to this question. Is International Women's Day still relevant to young people today? So I'll push it over to you, Nick.
So my outlook on social media shows that it's still a huge thing that goes around, a huge presence on the day. And I see last year I saw many people posting online showing their support. So I think it is definitely an annual thing that will happen every year. So I think it still shows relevance online, and in real life, it's definitely a thing that needs to still be pushed. As I see it, about those CEO roles, but even on the streets, police showing support. So yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
And what are you going to do tomorrow for International Women's Day? You're going to post something? You're going to put a video up, or what?
Yeah, I think there's a fun thing to do, which is make a list of, from my perspective as a musician, make a list of the top 10 female artists, composers, and post that online to show support.
Brilliant. And finally, throw the question back at me.
Yeah, do you think International Women's Day still remains relevant?
Yes, I do. I think that we can be, given the rhetoric that everything's equal, that there are more women in senior roles, or that organizations have got 40% women working in them. But you need to delve down behind the statistics there, because it could be that women are in support roles or roles that don't have the amount of influence, or their salary is far less. I think that there are some huge issues for women and girls surrounding safety. You quite rightly say that the internet has opened up another level of potential abuse for women and girls. And I know that you wouldn't do that, Nick, but there are a minority of men and boys that feel that it's absolutely right to do this, and it silences women and girls and disempowers them, makes them feel frightened and lacking confidence. And that's not what we want in the world, is it? So International Women's Day really is relevant to young people today, just as much as it would have been when I was in my teens. So thank you very much for listening today. Thank you for the contributions from Angela, from Antoinette. Until next time, this is Susan Heaton-Wright and Nicholas Simon from SuperStar Communicator. Bye-bye.